You're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
With the 6th pick in the NHL draft, the Tampa Bay Lightning are selecting RBLR Lightning for their year-round coverage of the best team in hockey. Hello, everybody, and welcome into RBLR Lightning. My name, as always, is Jake Ricker. Alongside me, it's Joe Zamataro. It's Matt Gannon. Guys, welcome back to the show. The draft is upon us in just a couple of days here. How are you guys doing today?
Is that going to be the first draft pick that the Lightning have this year? Number 6. Is there anything earlier coming up?
I believe the 6th round is the first pick we have. It's a late one. It's not much action unless the Lightning maybe make a move early to get something going here. I don't know. We'll see.
No, I can't see it. I mean, 6th round, man. At least it's not a super deep draft this year.
Well, before we start getting into the nitty-gritty of the show, I do want to remind you guys, this is the last week where we are going for a nomination. They're hosted by Creative Loafing. They're doing their Best of the Bay. You can go over to their website, which is linked in the description and on our Twitter page at RBLR Sports. If you head over to the entertainment section and then Best Podcast and write in RBLR Sports, we would really appreciate it. If you guys are enjoying the content, head over there to Creative Loafing's Best of the Bay and throw us a nomination. And don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on whatever platform you may be listening to so you don't miss out on future episodes. And you can check out our older episodes where we've been doing report card series of all the different players. Although we're not doing that today, guys. We got something a little bit different for you today. Coming up today, we got news and notes, a little bit of look at the draft. We talked about some other news going on in the league. And then we've got a special guest coming on to talk about some of the Lightning prospects and the draft coming up here in just a few moments. So let's not waste any more time. I want to get right into it. And the first thing, guys, the Lightning made a pretty big financial move just last week where the Lightning sold a minority stake in the team, and they now have a record evaluation of $1.4 billion. That's billion with a B. And I want to make something clear because I know the reporting was a little confusing on this. I don't think a lot of people did a great job. No, the minority stake was not sold for $1.4 billion. That is the evaluation of the entire team. But it's still a big deal because this is the first time an NHL team has hit the $1.4 billion mark. So a huge success, if you will, for Jeff Vinik and the Tampa Bay Lightning, just showing how much hockey has truly grown right here in Florida.
It's pretty crazy considering the fact, too, that Ottawa, they're still in the process of selling to a Michael Andlauer, but I want to say that their evaluation was somewhere in the $950 million range, and that's a perfect comparable. You know, they're both the 92 expansion teams, but if it proves anything, it proves that hockey does work in the South.
Yeah, I mean, looking at what the Maple Leafs, probably one of the most expensive franchises, they had a valuation of $2 billion. I think it was 2 years ago that this is showing up, and I mean, to be quick math, 70% of the same value down here in Florida, and I mean, good for Vinik. I freaking love that guy. He's done so much for Tampa, especially the downtown area, and it's good to see that not only is he been able to make some money for himself, but cash out a bit as well.
I don't know about you guys, but every time I hear about a minority sale or just a sale of the Lightning in general, I start to panic just a little bit because I'm like, oh no, please tell me that Jeff Vinik did not sell the team, because I want him to be the owner for as long as humanly possible because he has just been so good for the Lightning. And thankfully, that was not the case.
Yeah, to be very clear, he still holds the majority, and with that, he's got all the control.
just a minority stake, but a huge win for the Lightning and Jeff Vinik himself. And who knows where they're going to be at from a couple of years now. And speaking of sales, by the way, I've got an exclusive code just for our listeners here on RBLR Lightning. If you head over to our shop.rblrsports.com, and you check out our awesome inspired merch from each of the different teams, Lightning, Rays, Rowdies, Bucks, you name it. We've got some awesome merch over there, and you guys can use code BOLTS for 10% off your order. Links, as always, are in the description. It's shop.rblrsports.com, and you can check out some of the awesome merch right over there on the screen if you're watching here on YouTube. So don't forget to head over there and check out some of the awesome inspired merch.
That may have been the smoothest one that you snuck in there, all the way up to where you lost the difference between your left and your right for pointing to the promo on the screen.
It can get confusing out here. Listen, there's a lot of things going on, but hey,
that was beautiful, though.
Let's keep going with some big news that the Lightning had, as they're going to have a new head coach of the Syracuse Crunch. Now, I'm going to try and pronounce our head coach's name because I tried to look up some pronunciations, but believe it or not, there is absolutely nothing. In the interviews that they do with him, I think are in French Canadian, but Ben Gruix, who is the head coach of the Syracuse Crunch, is now out, and he is going to be replaced by Joel Bouchard, who is a former NHL player and an AHL head coach. And this is big news, guys, because the last head coach of the Crunch had the most wins in franchise history, and you really don't expect those types of guys to get let go of their jobs. That'd be like if the Lightning fired John Cooper next season. It's not something you expect, but JBB said that he was really looking for just some new, fresh leadership in the Crunch organization. This was talked about with both JBB and Gruix, so it wasn't a out of the blue, hey, you're getting fired. It seems like this was a mutual parting, if you will. And I don't know if you really want to call it a mutual parting, because who wants to get fired from their job where they're doing so well? But what do you guys think on getting some new, fresh blood here in Syracuse?
Hey, it definitely might be a mutual parting. I mean, a lot of AHL head coaches, their main goal is to possibly take over the major league club team, and I think that position is firmly planted with John Cooper at the helm. I don't see that job coming open anytime soon. So hopefully, best of luck to Ben. But with Joel Bouchard, good luck to him. I think JBB knows what he's doing, knows his guys. He's got that French Canadian connection with him. So I don't know. Hopefully, smooth sailing ahead. But again, thank you, Ben, for everything you did for the Crunch. I mean, he was there 10 years or something. I
think I've read 7.
Okay. I mean,
still a really long time, and that's something that we get really spoiled with being Lightning fans. I mean, if you look at some of the younger people that watch the Lightning, they've only really known one head coach for a team, which is just completely unheard of. The longest tenured head coach in the NHL being right with our franchise, and something to be said about having him for so long. So it's 7 years is a very long time just to be with one team. So it's not surprising to see something change eventually, because after a while, you see it a lot if you look at, some of the other coaches that are a little bit more abrasive. One that we had here, John Tortorella, after a while, the message, basically just kind of gets stale, and yet, you got to switch stuff up to keep people hungry.
Well, and hey, we've had a lot of great success with Crunch coaches. John Cooper was one of the coaches for the Syracuse Crunch, and look how much of an amazing coach that he turned into. So I wish the best for Ben, and hopefully there'll be another long 7 years down there in Syracuse with a lot of great things going on down there and developing prospects. As we know, we've talked about so many times on this podcast, that's been one of the Lightning's best things they've been able to do is develop their prospects and come up and help them at the NHL level. I do want to mention too that the Lightning did announce their preseason schedule. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's typically what they do every single year, cycling between the Florida Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes, and Nashville Predators. And there also is an annual game that they're playing over in Orlando at the Amway Center. I will definitely be heading over to check out that game since I'm down here in Orlando. Are you guys thinking about checking out any preseason games this year?
I'd love to. Going back to some of the Panthers preseason games, I mean, they're always a good time. We get an opportunity to see some of the prospects that have a chance of coming up to the big team this year. It's a good mix, and of course, any hockey is good hockey, even if it is preseason hockey. I can't get enough of it, and I'm already kind of fiending for hockey again. So I'll definitely be tuning in, and even better if I can get there live.
I haven't been to the new Amway Center. Definitely like to check that place out. And I'm not huge into basketball, so if I get to do it, watching some hockey, it sounds like the absolute perfect excuse. Something that fans should know too is that there is a camp that happens with both like a prospects camp, a rookie camp, and then for the full team that usually is open to the public. Sometimes it's at the Brandon, what is it called now? TGH Iceplex, and then
I've always known it as the Brandon iSports Forum. Shows you how
they got a sponsorship a year or two ago instead of it being good old ISF. It's, now the tip. But they also do it at Amalie as well, where they have a good event. So if you want to check out some new people, it's something to look forward to.
I always get excited for the preseason schedule because those games are played right around my birthday, and I'm never sure if they're going to be actually playing on my birthday. And there is a home game on my birthday on September 30th, so I'm really excited for that game. Hopefully, the Lightning can bring home a win in that. It's always hard though because not a lot of the pro players are playing, so they usually don't have a great track record on that day. Hopefully they can get the win this time around, which should be some fun. Last thing to note of mention here that's going on tonight as of this recording is Braden Point is up for the NHL award for the Lady Byng Trophy. So of course we'll report on that as soon as we know if he win it or not, but good luck to Braden Point, and hopefully he can bring home some hardware for the Tampa Bay Lightning tonight in the award show. Now, let's get into the big part of this show, guys. We've got the draft coming up here in just a couple of days. It's approaching very quickly, and even though the Lightning don't have a ton of picks, they have very few, actually, and who knows, maybe they could make a move soon here and maybe move up in the draft. Who knows? But we brought in I have a special guest with us, Mike Gallimore, former writer for Bolts Prospects. Mike, welcome into the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. So we want to talk to you today about Lightning prospects and what we could be seeing for the draft. So the first question I have for you, how much do you think not having a lot of draft picks is going to affect the Bolts this year?
Well, in terms of the big club, I don't think the picks that they're looking at at this point in time really should factor in. Maybe some of the picks for next year's draft potentially could be used as draft capital, but the picks that they're holding on to at the moment, you would think probably have limited value. Might be a throw in and potentially in a trade that they potentially could make, but realistically they're probably have targeted or have a list of guys that they would just like to get in the system, and whether that's playing in Europe, whether that's playing college or juniors somewhere, and see where those guys are at a year, 2 years out. There's development camp that you guys mentioned just a minute ago. Get eyes on these guys and see how they progress. I really don't think they shouldn't factor in too much to the present season.
Now, JBB has been really good at drafting some gems, as we all know. What do you think about JBB's overall drafting process?
He's obviously been around a long time. Was a key piece of Yzerman's team as the right-hand man. And obviously Al Murray is the director of scouting, and so I think JBB and like Yzerman, his predecessor before him, I think they've done well to trust Al Murray, and I'm sure they have their own input from the viewings that they do make. I know that they're JBB is a workaholic, and just like Steve Yzerman before him, and I think at the end of the day, though, whether or not he's the director of scouting or not, he has to wear the hat. And so I think you got to give him a lot of credit for a number of the draft picks they've made that have been going through the system. You look at maybe some guys that haven't had a huge impact here yet, but over the next season or two, there's a name some of you may be familiar with, but Jack Finley is a guy they grabbed just a couple years ago. He's a big body, roughly 6'6" or so. He's big frame. He's maybe not at the hasn't maybe hit his ceiling yet with Syracuse, but I think that's sort of a dark horse in the next year or two. Maybe a guy that can jump in the lower lines as some other contracts come off the books. More immediately, a name that I'm kind of looking at this year is maybe might come out of camp, might steal one of the spots that could be there. But Gage Gonsalves was drafted several years ago and had a really, I think, took a big step forward last season. Might have been a little overshadowed by a European who unfortunately has departed the organizations. Simon Refors had a great second year with the Lightning, but has decided to return to Sweden. Had a great playoffs, but Gonsalves, kind of this tweener, could play maybe the top six role, but could play an energy role as well, maybe a third line. We'll see. He's a speedy little guy, but defensively responsible. He's somebody I'm keeping an eye on as we look forward. Now, obviously, there's another name that I think is many Lightning fans will probably recognize over the past few years. People wondering if he was gonna stick, but Alex Barré-Boulet, ABB.
I swear I was gonna bring him up if you didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that has been on the cusp. He's been right there, hasn't quite stuck around. Certainly feels like there's a golden chance here for him, guys.
Why do you? No, go on,
What do you think is the biggest reason why he hasn't been able to transition from such a outstanding play in the A to be able to play in the bigs and stay up?
Well, it's the NHL for a reason, right? It's the hardest league, and the competition is that much more fierce. The AHL is a fantastic league in and of itself, but to lock down what really realistically needs to be a scoring line role for ABB. It's hard to imagine him being placed in more of a defensive, taking a lot of D zone draws. That's just not really, you're not optimizing his usage there. So he really was just kind of, I think, faced with an uphill battle in terms of the talent that was already present on the roster. There were opportunities that did come his way to get cups of coffee, and whether through cap situations or injuries. And I thought he was fine, or you might say adequate, but I mean, not enough to necessarily justify at that point in time supplanting somebody else. And but obviously there's a cap crunch. I'm sure you guys are eager to see how that gets resolved. There's a bit of a cap crunch coming, and potentially with Alex Killorn, but that might have been his swan song there in the spring with this organization. Maybe Ross Colton might not be around. It looks like there's a chance here, a much better chance for him to stick this time around.
Mike, I have a question. I've been really high on this Lucas Edmonds. I know he was an overager in the draft. I believe this was his, when we drafted him, it was his last year of eligibility, and he had a really, really strong second half to his crunch debut. Do you see him joining the club anytime soon? Do you see his ceiling getting any higher? He's somebody that I have a huge affection for. I really love the bold move that the Lightning did, trading up in the draft, being able to acquire him. They obviously saw something there with him. Of course, I don't think he's going to make the jump this year, but do you see him potentially getting a roster spot in the future?
I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, they like the kid. They as you mentioned, going out of their way to get their hands on him in the draft. And like you said, he did come on strong, and he's kind of what they're looking for. They need a little more pop from their prospects. They have a lot of, like, you think of Gabe Fortier. They've got guys that can play, a number of guys that project as more two-way players. and might be able to do spot duty on the upper lines. But Edmonds, he can play, or you would project or hope that his ceiling would be as a scoring liner. So I think, and then over the next couple seasons, there's going to be opportunities for guys to make the leap, either maybe on a temporary basis, filling in with injuries, and then eventually maybe with players moving on to different pastures. I would expect he'll be in the mix sooner than later, and by sooner I'm saying maybe by the end of the next season or next year or two. I would expect he'll be in the mix.
Speaking of big names, Isaac Howard is probably one of the bigger ones that the Lightning have, and he was just drafted recently, so probably still see him at the NHL level. What do you think the Lightning can expect from a guy like Isaac Howard?
I think similar to another draft pick of theirs, Reed Duke. They identified with the last couple drafts. They took some, I don't say swing for the fences, but that'd be kind of an injustice, but they took guys that they clearly they see goal scoring potential. Right? They see guys that have a nose for the net, that get into position, that have good shots, whether it's clear looks, or whether they're trying to pick their spots through screens or whatever. They've identified guys that they think can keep up with play, A, but B, have that ability to close out plays. And Isaac Howard he's got that a little bit of flash to him. He's maybe not somebody expect like anybody expect like Connor McDavid dancing up the ice, right? But he's somebody that likes to have the puck on his stick. He's not afraid to fight for territory. And he's energetic, right? I think you guys probably recall the draft day when he was selected, electric, right? Just very, very memorable all around. So I think what they're looking for him, and as well as, like I say, with Edwards, with Duke, is let's see how these guys continue to progress where they're at. And hopefully that they're challenging. These are the guys you would expect from the prospect pool that should be challenging for those scoring line roles as they open up in the next couple of years.
Now, the cap situation, as we mentioned a little bit before, is very complex. You basically need your own degree to know how the cap works, especially with where the Lightning are at, right up against it. We mentioned Killorn as well. How do you think the Lightning handle this year, knowing that the escrow is supposed to be paid off next year and the cap is supposed to take a jump? Yeah,
so this year, I mean, it seems like every year the Lightning have been up against the cap, right? Going back to, throughout much of the Vinnick era, he's been willing to plunk down a lot of money to keep this team competitive. And as this window is open, keep it going. Obviously, at the present time, the constraints are pretty severe. I think they're in the neighborhood of roughly $7 million, depending on whether you go to cap friendly or you remove this player or that player. What number of players you're going to keep, 21, 22 guys, 23 guys on the roster. But roughly $7 million to sign a backup goalie and at minimum 4 forwards. And that's assuming you don't really do anything to the defense. And that's without Colton or Killorn in the picture. So it's this year in particular is a very challenging spot for JBB. I don't envy him. I don't think many people would. But that said, I kind of identified 3 routes, if you will, that I kind of see this, I'm guessing, might play out. And there's the conventional take, right? That maybe, obviously, the money's not there to keep everybody. Maybe that's Alex Killorn has played his last game with the Lightning, and who could begrudge him cashing in one last time, be it in Montreal or elsewhere. Maybe that's re-signing Alex Killorn, but choosing to deal Ross Colton to another club that sees a 20-something or mid-20s guy on the rise who's potted as a near 20-goal guy so far in his career each season. So that's a tough call, but that seems to be the conventional take as I read it. Pick one or the other and then fill in the spots with whatever space you got left. Maybe a bolder approach might be to move on from both. I don't know. That's really I don't think that's going to be a popular take, but that then gives you the freedom at that point to decide where you're going to plunk down maybe $2.5 or $3 million on one player. Do you want to address the lefty? Maybe not. Maybe you say, okay, I really want to, we want to go in a different route up front, and replacing. Maybe we can turn Colton into a draft pick or a different player that's got more control over the contract for the next couple of years. That's maybe a bolder play to make. And then I call this the white knuckle option, but trying to use a different player to free up some room. And then whatever you do with Colton and Kaloran again, and by this I'm specifically saying, looking at one of the younger guys, the trio of Cirelli and Chernak and Sergachev, and deciding to make a really difficult choice. Now I don't think this is likely, okay, but my only spin on this would be if I were JBB and I was really determined to free up additional room. Looking down the roster, I think the most expendable big contract that was recently added, I personally would lean towards Chernak. And I know he's a popular guy. He's a thumper. But when you look at the Lightning's D, they currently already have 7 or 8 guys under contract. The skill set, I think, is the most replaceable. You have Zach Bogosian still on the books. And maybe as a near term, again, not really a desirable option, but a backup against the wall, trying to be creative to do things elsewhere on your roster. That is at least an option that maybe it's just due diligence on JVB's part to consider it. Again, I'm not saying it's necessarily what's going to happen or necessarily should, but it's there. That's the white knuckle option.
Mike, I got to be honest. I don't love what I'm hearing over there. Kaloran to the Canadians and then Chernak off. I don't. That's some tough pills to swallow for me. I think. I mean, I understand it. Listen, it's a business, as they say, and you have to make some tough decisions.
This is not the summer for a lot of easy choices, right? This is look. I think the conventional option is probably more realistic, or. I look back at the series at Toronto, and I think, they play. Look, we can all look at the end result, and we can say, "Hey, that was very disappointing. They choked away a couple games there. That they, 3-goal lead in the third period. How do you not close that out? That should be a death sentence, right, for any team, and especially the playoffs." But I honestly felt like the complete opposite of how things played out the previous spring, where we edged past, the Lightning edged past Toronto. And I thought Toronto at even strength throughout much of the series, the previous matchup, I thought Toronto arguably, it could have easily been Toronto series. And I thought, honestly, most of those games were taking it to the Lightning, and Vasilevsky obviously came up big the previous year. But this year, I honestly felt pretty good considering all things considered. The Jeannot trade, Tanner Jeannot's the name that really hasn't come up yet in the podcast, but that trade really didn't quite, pan out the way we were hoping for, this spring. Although there's room for that to maybe be salvaged.
Right. I got to jump in and
yeah, go ahead.
Knowing what he's supposed to be bringing to the table, and if he gets signed, do you think that that the Lightning overpaid? Do you think the Lightning overpaid?
Oh man, that was what's the diplomatic answer, right? That was a hefty haul, right, for a lower liner. I think everybody recognizes, I would expect most people would recognize that was a big price to pay. But again, you look at the timing. It's the trade deadline. Yeah, you could say some other teams maybe didn't have to pay as big of a price for some of the players acquired. Vegas, for example, what they paid to get Ivan Barbashev, right, out of St. Louis. I mean, by comparison, yeah,
Matt was dying on
that was
that one.
and this is also a time I was just I can't remember who I was texting about this not too long ago, but man, to have a couple of those draft picks currently, that maybe a little extra ammo. When you look at Vancouver, for example, that has been dangling Connor Garland, maybe might have been willing to eat a little bit of that, especially now that they've bought out Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I'm drawing a blank for. Oh, sorry. Now that they bought out OEL, they might be able to eat some of Connor Garland's contract. They don't seem to be, after having traded for him just a year or whatever it was ago. It seems to have fallen out of favor there. And that would be a heck of an opportunity, maybe in the $2.5 million range with some retention, maybe $3 million range, to get a guy that would be maybe it might be somewhat analogous to getting somebody like I'm losing my train of thought. Just a couple years ago, I hate when that happens.
Happens at the worst times.
Exactly. God, went off the.
Well, while you're thinking about this, I will say that we've talked about Tanner Jeannot a lot on this podcast and whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, the conclusion we've come to, I think all three of us, is that a lot. Well, me and Matt, I know we don't love it. It's a lot, but it's still early, and he couldn't have a Brandon Hagel type situation where he takes a little bit to get used to the new team and the new scenery, and he could start playing really well. Matt, I know you've got a question. What do you got for us?
Yeah, Mike, a little bit ago, you mentioned something about signing a backup goaltender, but I'm of the belief that I think Hugo might be ready to take that step. Of course, he's got a brick wall in front of him in Vasilevsky, but do you think with his consistency and his growth he's shown in Syracuse, he'd be ready to maybe take that backup position, maybe not full-time, but, sprinkle him in some games if possible this year?
I think that thing with Hugo Allenfelt is his contract certainly is desirable, right? Like in terms of the cap hit, he's got that going for him. Certainly he's been with Syracuse past couple seasons, and so there's the familiarity is there since they brought him over from Europe. He's got that going for him. I wouldn't rule him out from being the backup. But on the other hand, they might like him to have that starting spot, maybe secure, really prove himself as the number one and take the reins there for another year. I don't know. I could see either way. Honestly, I know it's kind of 50-50 is not a real exciting answer. But again, the contract, familiarity lends itself to he's certainly a candidate, but I could easily see the JBB wanting to get a veteran, pluck a veteran for $1 million or less and just plug him in behind Vasilevsky.
If not Hugo, do you have your eyes on anybody else? Is there any, older vet, suitcase that you have in mind?
I'm of the mind. I'll be honest with you. I'm of the mind. I don't say the backup doesn't matter at all. It does, but
no, we get what you're saying.
Let's be honest, right? Like, if Vasilevsky's not, in net in the spring, when the playoffs come around, you're just hoping for the best at that point. So, we obviously they're going to try and find somebody they think they can, whether that's Hugo or otherwise, that can play 20 to 25, maybe this year, maybe upwards of 30 games after some of the commentary that Vasi had. They just need to get in, right? Like the Lightning don't need to win any regular season accolades. I kind of am hoping we'll see some of the big guns, so to speak, as much as their cap situation allows. Hopefully save some of the mileage, late in the season, and that goes for Vasilevsky as well. Maybe a few more nights off. But I personally I'm whoever they sign at the backup Vasilevsky, I'm not sweating that.
So, Mike, we talked a little bit about the idea of maybe losing both Killorn and Colton. Something that I sometimes need a refresher on, and I'm sure that some of the fans listening would appreciate. So Killorn is on a UFA contract, and Colton is on an RFA. What does that exactly mean for the team, and what sort of leverage do the Lightning have with each of those players?
Okay, so just free agency basically it boils down to two general categories. In UFA is unrestricted free agency. Alex Killorn's contract has expired, or he will officially be able to sign with another team without any restrictions at all as of July, when free agency starts. Was it July 1st this year?
Yeah, first.
Yeah. They had changed it previous years, but yeah, so back to July 1, right? So. So Alex Killorn can sign with any team, can negotiate with any team. With Ross Colton, the difference being a restricted free agent, and notably one who he has what's called arbitration rights. Okay, not every restricted free agent is eligible to file for arbitration, which then you would have a case set up, and until that case happens, until that court hearing, or that date, I should say, with the mediator. You can negotiate with the team or whatever, but it's not all restricted free agents have that. Ross Colton does, and so he can elect to presumably he'll receive a qualifying offer from the Lightning, and then kind of formality, his agent would behoove them to file for arbitration, assuming they don't negotiate with another team. They'll be free to negotiate a contract with another team, but the Lightning will have the opportunity to match that contract if that were to happen. Okay?
So you're saying that Colton can shop
right between an unrestricted and a restricted. He's still a free agent. Ross Colton is still a free agent, and once free agency window begins, he can negotiate with other teams. But the Lightning then have the ability, if were Ross Colton to sign with a different team, the Lightning would have an ability to match that contract. Okay, you saw some hijinks a couple years ago with Sebastian Aho, right, and the Montreal Canadiens, and that was kind of like there was some payback, right? Carolina went and got Kotkaniemi out of Montreal, right, with their own offer. So it's with Ross Colton, the Lightning exercise more control over the end process. I would just say what's potentially challenging for the Lightning is if some other team were to say, "Hey, we'll gladly pay this guy, $3, $4, $5 million a year for 5 years." That's really going to put a significant crimp in the Lightning's plans if they were hoping to hold on to him, and they might have to decide at that point to just take the compensation that would come, and their varying levels of compensation. I don't want to.
This isn't so much of a question, but it did just kind of spark a light bulb in my brain.
Yeah.
About a month ago, I saw a report from a reporter, something about Vancouver having interest in Ross Colton. And you brought up the name Connor Garland earlier as well. Speaking of retention, I'm wondering if we potentially see a swap in place. I mean, it's not adding up to be, but it did pique my interest a little bit. Threw that light bulb on just a bit.
I mean, that might be an outcome that would be acceptable. I mean, I would love to see Ross Colton stick around here. I mean, I like the way he plays, and I like that he's sort of somewhat of a Swiss Army knife, right? I mean, you can bump him up and play him on maybe alongside a Stamkos, maybe in a pinch. You put him up there, with Braden Point. But he obviously he's more, or at this point in his career, he's played in a more, you might say, limited role, defensive role, but he has been able to chip in. I mean, he's contributed quite well for the role he's played. So this is just where I see a potential for where his camp, I would imagine, would be interested in seeing what's out there opportunity wise. You think back a couple seasons, years ago, whether it's Jonathan Marchessault, right, guys that we lost, Carter Verhaeghe, right. Maybe not exactly the situation that Ross Colton is in, but Ross Colton might have an opportunity to. You might have a team that really wants him in the mix and is saying, "Hey, we can slot you in. We envision you playing, power play minutes, right? Top line power play minutes, playing along our big guy."
He has an amazing one-timer. I know that for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Not better than
other
coaches.
teams have noticed. And you mentioned Vancouver, which that's a really interesting idea. I hadn't really quite pieced those. What about New Jersey, right? He's a local product, right? And there's a team I'm sure he'd have interest in maybe joining an up-and-coming and certainly just made the playoffs and
It's an exciting
took
team
out
for sure.
the rival, the crosstown rivals, right? So he would be interesting to add alongside a guy like Jack Hughes, or at least, maybe Andre Palat, right?
If Russ,
That's another team I would kind of look at maybe as a trade partner for the likes of Ross Colton.
if Ross Colton's going to stay, I hope it's a team-friendly deal. If he leaves, I hope he gets the biggest possible contract so we can get some draft picks back in exchange for him since he's a restricted free agent. But I think Alex Killorn is going to stay personally because I think he's willing to take a team-friendly deal because he loves it here so much. Fingers crossed. We're going to have to wait and see. It's hard to say just because it's, as we're talking about it here, there's so many different things that can happen with these guys. It's tough. Mike, I want to ask you, so we've been very blessed, the Lightning fans, with the prospect pool that we've had, and guys have been able to jump up quickly. You look at Nick Perbix, Darren Radish this year, Ross Colton just a couple years ago. I don't know how much you've looked at other teams' prospect pools and how they handle your things, but do you have any other larger thoughts on how well the Lightning have handled their system overall?
Yeah, I can't say that I spend a whole lot of time on, drilling down on every other team's, prospect pool. What I will say that I feel, I know Syracuse just made a change. We that was some big news, right? With Benoit Gruel that is no longer the head coach in Syracuse. But I just want to make a point that I think the Lightning, given that they've been a competitive club, this window that started to open up, a decade ago, and this run that we've kind of been on, maybe some of the early excitement from the triplets, right? The Tyler Johnson, the Andre Palat, the Nikita Kucherovs. We had some high-end talent that came into the in the organization, but they've been able to supplement over the years, and especially as the draft, some of the earlier draft picks haven't quite panned out. You think of Slater Cuckoo. You think about maybe more recently the Cal Foot. Didn't quite play out the way we wanted it to. But still finding guys that, whether through the draft or whether through undrafted signings out of the juniors, we're probably going to see more of, like we in recent weeks out of Europe. We saw some Simon Refours leave, but they signed two players out of Europe, Valtteri Marella and the defenseman, and his name escapes me at the moment, pronunciation, but a defenseman. I think we're gonna see continue to see a mixture of this kind of approach as we kind of restock the pick cupboard, so to speak. What I'm encouraged by is that when you've seen, like you mentioned, Nick Perbix, who was on the cusp for the better part of a season before making the leap full time, and I was Darren Radish, who came into talk about trial by fire, right? Like, comes the last few weeks of the regular season, joins the team, and then is thrust into with the injury to Eric Chernock, with that unfortunate dirty hit, right, by Michael Bunting, but thrust into the fire. And really, I thought Darren Radish had himself a fantastic, series, given all things done, all things considered. And that's, and it's just a testament to, maybe Syracuse hasn't, won a championship down there and over the last number of years, but they've been going to the playoffs year in, year out. And again, when the Lightning need a body to step up, somebody to come and fill in the ranks, they don't look out of place. The development process is there, and that's what's encouraging to me. Sure, maybe we're not getting the benefit of having very early first round and very early second round draft picks, over the last handful of years, but it's hard to bet against, Al Murray and JBB, and yeah, the Tanner Jeannot trade certainly looks kind of, with the number of picks that were given up, quite a hefty price. But they wanted that guy. They see something there, and I guess I've just kind of given up double guessing, or second guessing, I should say, right off the bat. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's see how things play out. I just got to guess close, and I absolutely, I think that they've got a good thing going with their development system.
The Crunch would have won a championship by now, but we keep stealing all of their good players. We need them up here at the NHL level. Mike, I forgot to ask you this when we first joined the show, but it's something we ask all of our guests that come on. What would you eat out of the Stanley Cup if you had it for a day?
Oh, man. Jeez. Okay, I'm going to guess this is probably not the answer you've received previously. I would say tapioca pudding. I am a big tapioca pudding fan, and
Like it.
Why not just bring that to the table, right? I just boatload
You're
of
something
tapioca
else, Mike.
pudding,
You're
go to
something
town.
else. And it doesn't surprise me for a second.
That shouldn't surprise you, Joe.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and joining us and talking some Lightning hockey here. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks. It was great.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us in this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe right here on YouTube so you don't miss out on future episodes, and follow us on social media at RBLR Sports or at RBLR Lightning with all the stuff we're doing here. We'll talk to you guys in the next episode.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.